picture a bouncer at a highly exclusive, heavily guarded underground club.
Okay.
His entire job is keeping out a very specific group of people that the management considers a threat.
Right.
Like, he is the muscle, the enforcer.
Right. He's the guy you don't want to mess with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, imagine that same bouncer suddenly turning around, walking inside, and like becoming the lead singer of the exact underground band he was just hired to suppress.
That is quite the pivot.
It really is.
Yes.
And welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're joining us because the mission today is to unpack a biographical profile of a Qing Dynasty imperial soldier who pulled off one of the most dramatic and dangerous life pivots in recorded history.
Yeah, the historical footprint of this man, St. Augustine Zhao Rong, and the 119 companions who followed in his wake, it's just massive.
It's huge.
It is. And to really get to the bottom of how a state enforcer becomes an outlawed martyr, we spent time synthesizing a really fascinating stack of documents.
Yeah, we pulled from historical timelines, accounts from Franciscan media, Catholic World Report.
We also looked at a YouTube catechism transcript, some papal letters from Pope John Paul II.
And we even found a modern local parish bulletin from St. George Roman Catholic Church, just to see how this legacy trickles down today.
Right. It's a broad mix.
It is. But before we go any further, I need to make something explicitly clear to you, our listener. We are walking into some incredibly heavy, complex political history today.
Oh, definitely.
This narrative intersects with the brutal realities of European colonialism, the Opium Wars, the Chinese Communist Revolution, and we're absolutely not taking any political sides here.
No, not at all.
Our only goal is to impartially report the events, the human psychology, and the varying perspectives exactly as they're laid out in these sources.
And that neutrality is just, it's vital, because if we let modern political biases dictate how we view an 18th century soldier, we just completely miss the raw human element of his transformation.
Yeah, we miss the actual story.
Exactly. So we really have to start by establishing just how deeply embedded Zhao Rong was in the imperial system that he's eventually going to rebel against.
Right, because my initial thought when looking at his early life was to search for some hidden rebel streak.
Sure.
But it's not there. Born in 1746 in Wuchuan County, that's in the Guizhou province of Qing China, his original name was Zhao Rong.
Right.
And he wasn't born into some quiet philosophical enclave. He came from a family of soldiers.
Yeah, military service wasn't just a job for him. It was his inherited identity.
Literally in his blood.
Exactly. He was a product of his environment in the truest sense. By the time he was 20 years old, he had joined the imperial army of the Qing Dynasty.
Wow.
20?
Yeah, so he was fully integrated into the secular state apparatus, and this is a crucial foundation. He spent his 20s acting as an agent of the empire during a period of really intense anti-Christian persecution.
Which brings us back to that bouncer analogy. His literal day-to-day job description was to guard Christian prisoners.
Yeah, he was the barrier, the literal barrier between the state and this outlawed, foreign-associated faith.
So he wasn't like a blank slate. He was actively participating in the suppression.
Very much so.
So the leap from being the guy holding the keys to the jail cell to actually asking to be put inside it, that requires a massive psychological catalyst.
Right. And the sources pinpoint that exact catalyst to the year 1785. The imperial army assigned Zhao Rong this specific, really high-stakes task.
Okay.
He was ordered to escort a French missionary priest, a man named Jean-Gabriel Touron de Fres, all the way to Beijing for execution.
And Dufresne, we should note, would later be named a bishop and ultimately martyred himself.
Exactly.
But I'm trying to figure out how a hardened soldier flips his entire worldview during an escort mission. I mean, I initially assumed Dufresne must have preached some grand, persuasive theological sermon, like from the back of the prisoner card.
It would be the Hollywood version.
Yeah. But the records don't point to a debate.
Yeah.
They just point to observation. Zhao Rong just watched him.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that the mechanics of this conversion are purely behavioral. The journey to Beijing was long. It was grueling. It was physically punishing.
Just a brutal track.
And during those weeks, Zhao Rong watched Dufresne face immense suffering with extreme patience.
Wow.
He observed a man approaching his own imminent violent death with total calm.
And that is what I find so fascinating. Because soldiers see death constantly.
Right.
They see people die bravely on battlefields.
Right.
But Dufresne's demeanor clearly hit a totally different nerve.
It did. There's a profound difference between the adrenaline-fueled bravery of a combatant and the quiet, immovable peace of a man walking willingly to an execution, especially one he could easily avoid by just denouncing his beliefs.
Right, he had an out. He just refused to take it.
Exactly, and that difference is the essence of martyrdom. I mean, the word martyr originates from the Greek word for witness.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Zhao Rong was converted by a physical witness, not a pamphlet. He saw an individual who possessed a psychological and spiritual peace that the entire weight of the Qing Empire couldn't break.
They couldn't confiscate it.
No. The blood and the patience of the martyrs directly seeded his conversion.
So the psychological armor just cracks. And Zhao Rong actually begins listening to this prisoner. And the break from his old life is immediate and radical.
Very radical.
He asks for baptism, takes the new Christian name Augustine, and completely abandons his military career.
And we have to understand, leaving the military in that context isn't just a career change.
Right.
It's an act of profound social and political defiance.
You're stepping out of the protection of the state.
Exactly. But Augustine doesn't just retreat to practice his new faith in secret. He decides he wants to minister to his own people. Just 5 years after his baptism, he undergoes training and is ordained by François Potier, the apostolic vicar of Shekuan.
Okay, let's clarify those titles for a second, because they fundamentally change Augustine's role in the story. When we hear apostolic vicar, we're talking about a representative appointed directly by the Pope to manage a missionary territory.
Right, usually a foreigner.
Exactly. But Augustine himself becomes something entirely different. He becomes the first Chinese-born diocesan priest.
And that distinction is paramount.
Yeah, explain that.
So, a missionary priest typically belongs to a foreign religious order, like the Franciscans or Jesuits, and they travel to foreign lands.
Right.
But a diocesan priest belongs to the local area. He's incarnated into that specific region, answering to the local bishop, with the intent of serving his own geographic community for life.
Which completely flips the script. He's no longer a foreigner bringing an alien concept. He's a native Chinese man, a former imperial soldier ministering to his own neighbors.
Exactly.
And the records show he was sent to work in Yunnan and later managed all Catholics in several counties in western Sichuan. And he was incredibly effective.
Very effective, bringing a lot of people into the faith.
But that very success acts as a lightning rod for the authorities.
It had to. The friction was inevitable because the political climate surrounding Christianity in China at the time was an absolute powder keg.
Oh, for sure.
To the Chinese authorities, this religion often looked totally indistinguishable from Western imperialism.
And I found myself, honestly, empathizing with the emperor's paranoia here.
It's hard not to when you look at the context.
Right. When you look at the historical timeline, European powers were aggressively pushing into China. We're talking about the era surrounding the Opium Wars,
Yeah.
where foreign powers literally bombed coastlines, forced the sale of addictive narcotics, and then used those same unequal treaties to demand open access for their missionaries.
Yeah, it was a package deal.
So from the king court's perspective, this faith was just a Trojan horse for foreign conquest.
And the source material actually acknowledges that dynamic impartially. Missionaries were inextricably linked to foreign colonization in the eyes of the populace.
Yeah.
In fact, the Catholic World Report article we reviewed highlights a glaring example. There was a European bishop named Amser who literally draped a massive German flag from his church steeple in China.
Wait, really? A German flag on a church in China?
Yes.
And he hung a sign next to it that read, "May Germany live, flourish, and grow." It's staggering.
It is.
I mean, if you're a local Chinese governor looking at a German flag flying over a church, you aren't seeing a spiritual movement. You are seeing a hostile foreign occupation.
Exactly. Which puts native Chinese believers like Augustine in an unbelievably dangerous position.
Yeah, they're caught in the middle.
They weren't just viewed as adopting a new philosophy. They were seen as cultural traitors adopting the religion of the invaders. And this geopolitical tension boils over in 1805 when the Jiaqing emperor launches a ruthless wave of persecution.
And because Augustine is a highly visible native leader, he's a primary target, he's arrested, subjected to brutal torture, and given a clear ultimatum.
Renounce this foreign faith or die.
And he definitively refuses.
He does. Now, what's fascinating here is that while the historical records don't outline specific supernatural miracles performed by Augustine himself during his ministry.
Right. No flying or, multiplying bread.
Right. We can see the sheer magnitude of his legacy by looking at the people who followed the blueprint he left behind. To really understand him, we have to look at the surreal, psychological endurance of his spiritual descendants.
The group collectively canonized as the 120 Martyrs of China.
Exactly. The companions.
Because the stories of his companions genuinely defy human logic. I want to slow down here for you listening, because the violence they faced is visceral, and their responses go far beyond mere stubbornness.
Oh, absolutely.
Take Wang, for example, a 14-year-old girl caught up in the Boxer Rebellion.
And just to give you context, the Boxer Rebellion at the end of the 19th century was a violent, anti-colonial and anti-Christian uprising. Driven by severe droughts and outrage over foreign encroachment, the Boxers targeted anyone associated with Western influence, especially native Chinese Christians. They viewed them as the root cause of the nation's suffering.
So you have this heavily armed, furious militia cornering a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
They tell her to apostatize, to abandon her faith, or face decapitation.
A literal sword to her neck.
And instead of panicking or pleading for her life, she faces her executioners and radiantly declares, "The door of heaven is open to all."
The psychological fortitude required for a child to say that in the face of a blade, it's difficult to comprehend.
It really is.
Then you examine the account of Kizuzi, an 18-year-old boy. He was captured in order to worship traditional idols.
Okay.
He refused. In response, his captors amputated his right arm.
We read that sentence so quickly in the sources, but the agony of that moment is unspeakable.
It's horrific, yet as they prepared to flay him alive, he didn't scream for mercy. He announced to them, "Every piece of my flesh, every drop of my blood will tell you that I am Christian."
That level of resolve forces us to ask deep questions about the human spirit. Like, you cannot just grit your teeth through being flayed alive.
No, you can't.
It speaks to a supernatural conviction, a complete detachment from the physical body in favor of an eternal reality. And that exact same defiance echoes well into the 20th century.
Yeah, and that's where we encounter Brother Joachim in 1947 during the Communist Revolution.
He's a Trappist monk.
Yeah.
And for those unfamiliar, the Trappists are a monastic order known for intense austerity, rigorous manual labor, and a strict vow of silence.
Very strict.
Their entire lives are dedicated to stripping away worldly comforts.
And that background perfectly contextualizes his endurance. When the Communist Army forced Joachim and his monastic brothers on a brutal death march, binding their hands behind their backs with iron wire.
Iron wire. Just brutal.
Yeah. But he was already psychologically conditioned to endure suffering. Over the course of that march, he had to watch 33 of his brothers die from abuse and exhaustion.
Yet when a priest managed to speak with him later and asked how he survived those weeks mentally, Brother Joachim's response was staggering.
What did he say?
He said his heart was at peace and even joyful, because they were innocent of the political charges against them, and he openly stated he would forgive his captors.
The ability to maintain inner joy and offer forgiveness while bound with iron wire, watching your friends die. It's the exact same spiritual DNA we saw in Augustine Zhao Rong watching Bishop Defiance a century and a half earlier.
Wow. Yeah,
It's an unbroken chain of radical endurance.
And it's a legacy that modern people still crave a physical connection to today. While researching, we actually found a recent parish bulletin from St. George Roman Catholic Church.
Right, the local bulletin.
Yeah, tucked right in the weekly announcements was an advertisement for a summer movie presentation about a virtual exhibition featuring over 160 sacred relics of the saints.
Showing that the physical remnants of these individuals, pieces of bone, items of clothing, are still treated as sacred treasures today.
People want that connection.
They do. Believers actively seek out these relics because they're tangible proof that this kind of extraordinary courage actually existed in flesh and blood.
Which brings us to the end of Augustine's physical life, but nowhere near the end of his story. In the winter of 1815, after refusing every demand to break his faith, Augustine succumbs to his torture.
Yeah.
He dies in prison from brutal beatings on January 27th, 1815.
And his death cements his role as a foundational pillar for native Chinese believers. Decades later, the institutional church begins the formal process of recognizing that sacrifice.
Right.
Pope Leo XIII beatified him in 1893.
Right.
But the flashpoint of controversy happened much more recently. On October 1st, 2000, Pope John Paul II officially canonized Augustine and his 119 companions.
Formally naming the group Augustine Zhao Rong and Companions.
Exact.
Now, when I saw that date, October 1st, I immediately understood why it caused an international incident.
Oh, yeah.
Because October 1st is the National Day of the People's Republic of China. It commemorates the founding of the modern state. The Vatican choosing that exact day to canonize people killed by Chinese authorities feels, at first glance, like a massive, intentional political provocation.
And Beijing interpreted it exactly that way. The Chinese government fiercely accused the Holy See of using the canonization to defy the state and pass a negative judgment on China's complex history.
I mean, it drove diplomatic relations to a freezing point.
It really did.
But looking at the Vatican's internal logic, was it actually a political shot?
Yeah.
Because there are layers to Catholic feast days that often dictate these schedules, right?
Right, and that is the missing half of the equation. In the Catholic liturgical calendar, October 1st is the feast day of St. Therese of Lisieux.
Right.
She is officially recognized as the patroness of all Catholic missions worldwide.
Ah, so there's the connection.
Yes, the Vatican selected the date to align with the global celebration of missions, not to antagonize the Chinese government's secular anniversary.
And to try and diffuse the situation, Pope John Paul II actually penned a personal letter to President Jiang Zemin, though the sources note it went unanswered.
Yeah, but the contents of that letter are vital for understanding the Church's stance. The Pope explicitly stated that the canonizations were in no way a political judgment on China.
Right.
Nor were they an attempt to legitimize the brutal history of European colonialism. He actually acknowledged that those historical situations were fraught with abuse.
He was trying to separate the native faith from the foreign flags.
Exactly.
The goal was to elevate native Chinese heroism. He wanted to show the world that these specific martyrs, men and women like Augustine and Wang, are universal examples of courage.
Right. He framed it as an honor for the noble Chinese people, celebrating their incredible capacity for coherence and bravery.
It really highlights how history just refuses to stay neatly in the past, doesn't it?
Oh, never. An imperial guard makes a personal choice in 1785, and it results in a geopolitical standoff between the Vatican and Beijing in the year 2000.
It's wild. But synthesizing everything we've pulled from these sources today, the thread that ties it all together is the terrifying, beautiful power of quiet observation.
It really is. We so often focus on the loud moments of history, the decrees, the rebellions, the executions.
Yeah.
But the pivot point here was entirely silent.
Exactly. Bishop Defres had absolutely no idea that his behavior in a prisoner cart was being scrutinized by the man tasked with guarding him.
He had no clue.
He couldn't have known that his quiet grace under pressure would completely shatter that soldier's worldview.
Right.
And he couldn't have predicted that this guard would take up his mantle, become the first native diocesan priest, and eventually be canonized as the namesake of 120 martyrs whose defiance would inspire generations.
It forces a profound self-reflection. You never truly know who is watching you handle your own suffering.
Yeah.
Or how your demeanor in your darkest moments might permanently alter the trajectory of someone else's life.
Which leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over today. Augustine Zhao Rong started out as the muscle for an empire, suppressing the very people he would later lead. If your entire legacy was judged solely by the people you guarded, opposed, or fought against in your youth, how completely different would your life story be compared to where you actually ended up?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We appreciate your time, your curiosity, and your willingness to explore the messy, beautiful complexities of history with us. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.